Thanks for the applause. That's an old Rick Miller joke for those of you who know it. Okay, so my crop's really easy. I mean, I picked the one sun devil thing in here, and I'm thinking, well, we got this ball game and all that. The metaphor for me is I could stand up here and be a cheerleader for philanthropy in the nonprofit sector, and we could all sort of do that. But I don't use this prop later, but I actually want to set that aside. First to say thank you, Marissa. It's great to be an interloper. It's great to be invited inside the tent of Supply Side Philanthropy because you all are very secretive and very exclusive. And once in a while, just to be in your company, what a pleasure.
Do you work for the Chronicle of Philanthropy? What's going on?
And so this will make my point in a minute. The other thing, and I've got to give Marissa a shout out around the partnership that we enjoy. I think the best is yet to come in the knowledge platforms we're trying to work with AGF on. But it also is full circle for me because it was a few years ago, that really our center, the previous name of our center, Leadership and Management Center, and ACF joined together. We invested human capital, financial capital, and launched the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits. And it's sort of a little known history the further years go by, but we're enormously proud of that. And so it's so cool then to see scale and Arizona Gives and all those things happen. And it's awesome to see the number of alumni in this room, but I won't give a shout out to all of you from all of our many programs, but you know, go Devils and all that stuff. Okay, so here's the deal. I could follow the tee up Marissa gave around. We could talk numbers and where's philanthropy and all that. It's okay, not particularly interesting, frankly. So what? Who cares? And as the resident analyst provocateur, I'd like to suggest some things, at least through the Peter Drucker world of looking out both the window while simultaneously looking in the rearview mirror and having maybe some perspectives around that. And so 3 things: value proposition. You know, what business are we really in? When I say we, remember I'm the interloper, I now want to be we, that we are in on the supply side. The context setting that I think we may want to pay some attention to, and then some issues, some next sort of 4 years that I think might be interesting. So here's the deal. A recent study of a sister center of ours, Center on Philanthropy, an iconic center, high net worth households, had the value proposition question of trust. And those in the nonprofit sector could go, yay, that 91% trust nonprofits' ability to solve societal problems. And when asked about government, it dropped to about 56% trusting the federal government to do so. So that's great, and to that we could add any number of indicators to say, rah, rah, nonprofit sector, aren't we great anyway? Au contraire. There are some huge issues I think will challenge and are challenging philanthropy on the supply side and demand side. And demand side, I'm thinking the direct service, the people that write grants to you. And that intermediary part of the sector, which are those organizations, and there are more of them all the time, that are both grant-seeking and grant-making simultaneously. Trying to work in social things at the same time, because I see the same faces at an AFP meeting as I do at an AGF meeting, and I get confused by that. It's not clear. Maybe it never was, but clearly is not clear any longer. And so if we throw all that in the mix, what does it mean? How do we make sense of it? So here's the value proposition. The issue of philanthropy, particularly with the fiscal cliff and some other pending issues that will unfold and decide upon, will be tested more than ever. And you know that as well as I do. The threat to charitable tax deduction, the shrinking state budgets, the call for charity to do more. And if you want to read a great treatise on this, go no further than Eduardo Porter's article in the New York Times. It was recent, and I can send it to Marissa, and you can send it out, where he really dissects in a profound way this value proposition using terrific data. And so I would say to our leaders here as we look forward is, what business are we in when we are a round-off area, even today, in the size of government, even today? We're a round-off era. Now, hopefully, through great leadership of foundations, it's not error, it's impact. It's round-off impact, round-off leverage, right? But it's sort of a interesting proposition when we hold the mirror up to ourselves and realize at scale we may not be as big a deal as we think we are if we define ourselves in a sector, right, like this. So charity's small relative to the potential need. Total charitable contributions were under $300 billion last year, that less than 2% of the economic output relative terms to the 100%. Doubling that amount wouldn't fill the hole left by deficit reduction. Experts estimate $500 billion a year in the long run. And so the data just sort of flows. Contributions have been stuck. Charitable contributions at 2% of personal income. Corporate donations have never increased beyond 1% of pre-tax profits. And I said this wouldn't be a data conversation, but I think if you just look at the cold hard facts of the numbers, the value proposition is an interesting one. How big, how vast, what are the inflection points of change that we can create individually and collectively? So some other issues since the 80s. If we track, and you can look at 4990s, look at budgets, charitable, getting the philanthropic piece, about 12% of nonprofit budgets. Important but insufficient. Important but insufficient. Where does the rest come from? Fees and payments from government. In 2008, philanthropic contributions, well, I mentioned that fees and grants from government are about 1/3 of these budgets. So value proposition is where do we sort of fit in that? And we turn to people like George Soros, and you can agree or disagree on his influence around this world. But here's what he had to say that might be an interesting thing to think about, and that is, given that philanthropy can innovate, and his value proposition is can innovate more than government. It's that nimbleness, that flexibility, can innovate more than government, can offer alternative approaches to challenges, set examples, develop standards, and determine the success of initiatives, so philanthropy can play that role. Still, he concedes, and these are his words, but it could be amplified by many not in this room, because remember, they're not the interlopers. They get to be with you. There are a lot of excessive claims about what philanthropy can and should do. We wear it on our sleeves, and then we're actually very limited at impact in many ways. So I just have 4 or 5. I'll tease out and throw it, Brian, to you in the group. One is the issue, therefore, of public policy. It's not a convenience any longer, if it ever was. It can't be ad hoc. It has to be central to the way in which we think about social change at all levels. And when I talk to nonprofit folks on the demand side of philanthropy, they often say, what about the charitable tax deduction, or what's going on? And everybody's railing on the charitable tax. These are not binary codes. I keep thinking, is this an on-off switch? It's all or nothing. We're going to save it, or it goes out the window the way it is. Or is there some other imagination that can be brought to bear on that with us creating other possibilities for that one issue? Because at the same time, remember the role of government, huge in many nonprofits, the limitation of philanthropy, the need to be involved in public policy, so it can't be a binary code that it's all or nothing on just that one issue. But here's the one I would love our panel to think about, and that is, and these are questions we have to think about. So, is it okay, and it's just a question, think of the 1 cent sales tax that went down. Now the fiscal cliff of education, what's the number of billion falling off, right, Arizona? Track the money from philanthropy, donor, to a nonprofit, to another nonprofit, to a super PAC, through an anonymous chain, influencing public policy in Arizona from Wichita, Kansas. I'm just asking, I'm not debating any opinion on whether you voted for or against the sales. All I'm just saying is that okay? I mean, is that the way in which we want to see philanthropy work? Because here's what's troubling is many of you in this room are funding education initiatives for successful kids and schools and so on. Now you're going to deal with that issue, right? So is that okay? And so when I think about public policy from a trend, what you ought to be thinking about in the next 3 or 4 years is we got to pull the lens back and think in a much grander way, way beyond this border, and what influences decisions in Arizona. Just an opinion. Secondly, and I'm shifting gears now, if I have to hurry, he's going to start throwing stuff at me. And that's the issue of inclusive practice. It's something we work hard on in our world. We have many touch points with next generation pipelines of students and of all levels. Still worry about, are we representative of the very publics that we wish to serve? And I can just tell you visually, looking at the room, no. Not defined only by race and culture and gender. I know that, but I'm just saying, no, we're not. It doesn't go without my eyes, and these gentlemen agree, a panel of white guys. And I might even say old white guys, and then I have to remind myself, I hope to be one someday. So it's all so I want to be really clear on this. It's not that these are experts. Their voices should be heard. But the issue over the next few years, if we don't start opening up the tent to a range of perspectives that normally are never allowed in the room or at the table, right? then our work, so what, for whom? And I'm stretching the point to make the point that you see. And by the way, the independent sector, other national infrastructure groups are working hard on the pipeline issues, American Express and others, to have a more representative, diverse, inclusive pipeline of staff, of board leaders, and others in our world. Blurring of the lines of the sector, another important one. I can just tell you we learn every day from our students at all levels. We have many programs, not just one program. And I have to tell you a revealing feature of what we're learning, and that is many are sort of sector agnostic, right? They're change makers. They want to change. They're as interested in, and it was funny you said Tom's Shoes. They're as interested in the model of Tom's Shoes as they are in going to work for a 501c3 or creating one or whatever. Do you hear that? I mean, it's not about government or the nonprofit form or the commerce marketplace. It's a whole fusion of interest around new forms, new faces, and new forces in this thing we call philanthropy. And it ought to be a topic someday that potentially AGF could take on in a much grander way. Blurring the lines of sector. Now, how do we see that in Arizona? We've got exemplars here. When I think of the work of the Impact Agenda of the United Way and the interface and lever points with government and the marketplace and the social sector, I mean, we have terrific innovation. And the work going on at ACF, the loan fund work, Jackie, I know about, you, Steve, is phenomenal. We've got terrific nimbleness and innovation happening in the space. The question is, will that be sufficient? Will that change the dial in the social conditions we care about in the next 3, 4, 5, 10, pick the number of years? The last couple things, and then I'll sit down, and it's the last two are tied. One is one of transparency. The other is one of who controls the social agenda. And it's a question that's holding the mirror up, Drucker's mirror, while simultaneously looking out the window. There are threats to philanthropy. There's threats to charitable giving. There's threats to even the foundation form in some circles. Concerns about self-dealing, concerns about who gave them the authority, let alone the responsibility, on any issue within a community. And it's a sobering question to ask ourselves as we look ahead. And the issue of transparency, how decisions are made, who actually tees up what the issues are in the first place, how do we know what that looks like, the we of a community. And I go no further than Diane Ravitch, and this might hit a little close to home to the gentleman on the far left, since we all know the big, huge organization that he once worked for. But if you know Diane Ravitch's work, you know, she was an Undersecretary of Education under Bush too, and was a principal cheerleader. How am I doing, Brian? And architect of Leave No Child Behind. And if you follow her work, she studied data. I mean, she just looked at the facts. The brutal facts, thank you, Jim Collins, and realized it's absolutely damaging, it is not working. I mean, that's Ravitch, and you got to read all her stuff to realize that. And she began to look at the role of foundations, particularly the big Gates Foundation. When one foundation has amassed over $30 billion, it has the financial power to shape the policies of government to its liking. And as she begins to dissect, never being able to get an audience, she goes to Seattle. Bill Gates won't see her, nobody will see her in the big foundation, right? According to her,
I would have seen her.
Have you seen her? Well, you'll talk about that. So when Bill or Melinda Gates is asked whether it is democratic for one foundation, their foundation, to shape a nation's education policy, they don a mask of false modesty, like, oh shucks, right? Well, you know, okay, and it goes on. But their disclaimers do not change the fact that they have power without accountability. They want accountability for teachers, but who holds them accountable, and so on. And she's reminded of the song from Fiddler on the Roof about when you're rich, they think you really know. Right? Now, Gates is a massive scale. We all know that. But we ought to just once in a while ask ourselves, at our level and levers, right? Do we ever just hold that mirror up and ask ourselves, do we come in and trump the very people we want to serve? And so she goes on to the final, who elected them? Why should they have the power to shape American education? So what I want to leave you with is, I think these are some challenges. I could be up here cheerleading all day. I give a lot of talk, just cheerleading how great we are. We, supply side, intermediaries, and demand side. But I think these are sobering questions that we might want to think about in the next few years as a community. And I'll turn things over to you, because you're ringing a bell. Thank you. Okay. right here.
No, you. Yeah, you get it. Let's give him another hand.